Welcome to Live from FM 91, conversation and performance with some of our area's finest guest ensembles and musicians, and in today's case, actors as well, because we are dedicating this program to Amadeus, which is being performed at the Toledo Rep. It's happening April 19th through the 28th at the Toledo Repertoire Theatre. That's at 1610th Street in downtown Toledo. You can find more information at their website, toledorep.org, or you can call up their box office. Get your tickets that way at 419-243-9277. Now, I've got three different people here with me in the studio, one person on the phone. I don't want to forget about them. But let me introduce the folks who are here with us today. That would be, well, ladies first. We'll go with Leigh Yenrick, right?
Leigh, yeah.
Leigh Yenrick. You were playing the role of Costanze Weber.
That's correct.
The wife of Mozart. And we have Joe Capucini as Salieri, right?
That's correct.
Salieri. Mm-hmm. We also have the director here, Matthew Gretzinger, and on the phone, we have the man of the hour playing the role of Wolfgang Mozart is Garrett Monasmith. Welcome, Garrett.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
We're so glad that you could join us, albeit by phone today. We're going to have a little sampling of the play a little bit later in the program, but most people are probably familiar with the movie of Amadeus. Peter Shaffer wrote the screenplay for that also, and he wrote the play, obviously, that you're doing. I wonder, and this is mostly for you, Matthew, I'm wondering if you can talk about the difference between the movie and the play. Like, what are people going to get from the play that they don't see in the movie?
That's an excellent question. Well, the play, having gone through a number of revisions by the playwright over the years, has developed to be much more about Salieri's self-destructive cycle, I would say, his obsession with Mozart that ultimately leads him to try to seek redemption. In the film, by I think it's Milos Forman, right? Mm-hmm. He and the playwright took out they had not yet included quite that much element of Salieri seeking redemption. Yeah. In this one, in the play as it is now, which I think was finalized around the turn of the century, there is much more of a sense of Salieri making that full journey towards realizing that he has destroyed not only the man that was God's mortal opposition to him, but also himself.
So is this a play, you think, more about Salieri in the spotlight as opposed to the composer Mozart himself?
Perhaps a little bit, yeah. I think in the film it's more of a double act, and in this one it still retains some of that element. But I think the dominant focus is definitely on Salieri.
Yeah, Garrett, do you believe that Matthew is on the right track there?
Yes, absolutely. I actually, as soon as we started production of this show, kind of internally, I was referring to it as the Salieri show.
Yeah. You notice I am not asking Joe for his opinion because I can figure out where that's going.
On this, do we?
Yeah.
I love you, Joe.
You're starting the rivalry already.
Oh, there's been one for a long time. We're fine.
So, Garrett,
Joe and I go way back.
Garrett, you're playing the role of one of the great composers / musicians of all time, really. I was going to say the 18th century, but really we play his music so much today. I wonder, talk a little bit about yourself and your own musical background and what you're bringing to this role.
Interesting question, actually. So I started on violin when I was 9, also started acting when I was 9, and I guess, I wouldn't call myself the virtuoso that Mozart was, but I was certainly writing music and performing in a band as early as 13, so maybe not quite as young as Mozart, but, I was playing violin in an orchestra at 9 and learning my music theory and To this day, I still play music and write music and produce it. Like I said, I don't consider myself to be nearly or anywhere near the realm of the virtuoso that Mozart was, but I would say that my composing's okay, and there's some brilliance to what I do, but the level of brilliance is just not quite. You know, it's fun to get to play him because if only for a moment I can get to see what it feels like to be so brilliant.
Yeah. Does that have any importance really in portraying the role of Mozart? I mean, being able to rise to the level of genius that Mozart did, or is it done for you already in the play?
I will give Peter Shaffer his due that the script lends itself a lot to the emotion of the scene, and I find that just by reciting the words that the playwright has given me, I am naturally in the right headspace for where I need to be emotionally in the scene. So in that respect, it's kind of an easy show. Given the volume of lines, it's going to be a little difficult, but I don't know if I lost the topic there, but sorry, I'm actually remote here in Texas.
Let me talk with Leigh and you, because you're playing basically husband and wife in this play. Leigh, tell us a little bit about your character of Costanze. I mean, she kind of gets a short shrift a little bit in the movie version. How does that occur in the play? How does that compare to the play?
It's been a long time since I've seen the movie version, so forgive my memory. But I think in the play she does get a lot. She gets a lot of time, and she gets a lot. I mean, we come out of Salieri's. A lot of the time, we come out of Salieri's memories, which is kind of a cool thing about this play, I think. But I think the beauty of Costanze, at least in this version of the play, she gets to actually have a full arc and a full circle, all the way to the end. So, and even gets to have her little note at the end of what happens and what she does to honor her husband.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing that I don't know if you got in the movie. Am I correct in that, Matthew?
Yeah, we never see that bit where she talks about how she lived, selling his papers,
his music.
Yeah.
And that is a real thing. I mean, she actually did that.
Yeah.
And was able to create this entire mythos of Mozart as, the great composer. It wasn't really a mythos, but she spread the word, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the end of Hamilton.
Yes.
It does. It totally reminds me of the end of Hamilton.
It does. It really does.
I only saw that on TV, so I thought you said Hamlet at first.
That's nice.
That would be a different version of this show,
Yeah.
and a sadder, even more sad than it already is. So
Yeah.
I would say.
And Matthew and I had already gone down that path. So.
Oh, man.
Absolutely. Joe, let's give you a chance to talk a little bit. Tell us about Antonio Salieri.
The thing I love about Salieri is he allows the actor to pursue 6 of the 7 deadly sins very, very clearly throughout.
Wow.
And
which did he leave out?
Sloth.
Oh, okay.
He is a hustler. He's writing and he's teaching and he's tutoring and he's working the social circles. He's working the emperor. But to be able to demonstrate very clearly the other 6 is really, really quite fun.
Yeah.
He's just a fantastic character, so well written. I mean, the script itself lends itself to a musicality that we just find ourselves into and propelling us. It's just a great script, a great character with all the characters are strong and all the actors are strong.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Joe.
I forgot he was there.
Yeah, Garrett.
Yeah.
Garrett is on the phone with us. Garrett, you agree with that assessment? How would you describe the Mozart of Peter Shaffer's play?
Oh, well, this is actually something I kind of wrote about when I filled out the form to audition. I kind of referenced this, but one of the things I was saying is I was looking forward to the challenge of trying to balance, portraying who Mozart was historically, along with the playwright's vision, and within the playwright's vision, this is really Salieri's retelling, or Salieri's version, or his memory of Mozart. So it's a very specific version of him, and it's kind of through. Well, personally, I'm trying to put it through a few different lenses. Anytime I play someone historically, I like to do a lot of research, which I have been. It's just kind of finding that balance, and I can't really. I will say, somehow, even though there may be conflicting stories about who Mozart was, somehow trying to balance all three of these, the playwright, Salieri's memory, and who he was historically, they do kind of mesh, or there is, I guess, like some common space there in the middle where they all kind of meet.
Yeah.
So he's a very complex character, but in this memory of him, he's just very much a child. And I kind of said to Joe early on, he reminds me of Michael Jackson in the sense that he was, very, a prodigy, child star, simultaneously forced to be an adult at a very young age.
Right.
So, very interesting concept to try to portray.
Well, you have the character that is both the vision that Salieri has in his mind of Mozart, his memories, as well as the real character of Mozart himself. I mean, you have a few different layers that you have to peel away there, I would imagine.
Right. References in the script to true historical things that, kind of like Scorsese does all the time, where it's it's a nod to something historical. It may not be the exact depiction of what happened, but there is a reference to something that actually did historically happen.
Yeah. What's going on there in the background? I keep hearing lots of different clicks and noises.
I am so sorry. I'm actually cleaning a contrast injector while I'm talking with you.
Oh, you're multitasking.
Yeah, I moonlight as a biomed. Actually, I'm just joking. That's my day job. I'm a biomedical engineer.
Wow.
At some times. I service medical equipment as well as buy and sell.
Well, we appreciate your time today. You guys have all worked at Toledo Rep before, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you all worked with each other before?
Yes.
This is my first time working with Joe. This is my first time working with Matthew. I have worked with Garrett before, actually.
Yeah.
And Leigh, we did have a show what you did together. We did Winter's Tale.
Yeah, but this is the first time I've worked with you as
That's
a director.
That's true.
That's true. We did work together back in Bowling Green. We
Ah,
did The Winter's
yeah.
Tale
Yeah, Shakespeare.
a few moons ago, as they say.
Well, I was thinking earlier about the whole idea of Mozart and Salieri and Costanze as reflecting like what is going on in the Shakespeare play Othello, right? Except that the wife, survives at the end for this play. Leigh is very happy that is the case.
We get one win sometimes.
Yeah.
We do die a lot in plays.
We'll take it definitely. Let's talk about the real history behind this play. I mean, this is a fictionalization. It sort of came out of a rumor that floated around that Salieri had poisoned Mozart, but was encapsulated in the play by Pushkin in the 1800s, then turned into an opera by Rimsky-Korsakov shortly thereafter, and eventually made its way to Peter Shaffer and this amazing play. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the myth of Salieri versus Mozart, Matthew.
Sure. Well, it sounds to me, I'll give you as a prologue, that your knowledge of the history far exceeds my own, but I did do some research on the play before preparing to direct it, and I became aware that there's a certain, at least on the part of the biographer that I was concerning myself with, there's a certain disdain for the mythologizing that happens in this play.
Yeah.
But Salieri is not the creature that Shaffer depicts, not the historical Salieri as far as we know. There is a lot of distortion involved. The poetic central conceit that Salieri is waging a war with God because he is this patron saint of mediocrity is very much the invention of the playwright. From what I was able to gather, Mozart and Salieri, they were aware of each other, of course, because they operated in the same milieu, but they didn't interact nearly to the degree that we see in the actual play.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like Shakespeare. With Shakespeare, you have to recognize, for example, with Richard III, that the actual history of the man is quite different from what Shakespeare presents. But we wouldn't for a second consider letting go of the myth as it's been shaped by the playwright here, because it has so much to say to us now, I think, about obsession and self-destruction and the confronting the divine in our lives and the mediocrity in our lives and reconciling those two things. So
well, it's definitely a standalone work of art itself. That certainly is one of the great plays of the 20th century by far. I'm talking with the creatives from the Toledo Rep's production of Amadeus by Peter Shaffer. That's happening at the Toledo Repertoire Theatre, which is at 16 10th Street in downtown Toledo. You can find more information about this production at toledorep.org, or you can call up their box office at 419-243-9277. Now, you have brought in a little play excerpt that you're going to perform for us. Can you just set the scene for that? This is between Salieri and Costanze.
Yes, it's is it the first encounter?
It's the second.
The second encounter between the two of them. And it's kind of, I think of it as kind of a seduction scene, because in it Salieri is attempting to woo Costanze with sweetmeats and his wily ways for his own purposes. So which involve, of course, the end result of destroying Mozart in the long term.
Yeah. It's interesting while you say that, and I'll just say this briefly before we hear the excerpt, but Salieri himself, as a real man, must have been quite a charming fellow, because he was friends, he had connections everywhere with everybody, and he was a renowned teacher as well as a composer, and he taught people like Schubert and what have you. He even taught Mozart's son, I believe, for a time. So I see that bleeding through into the play also, into this scene specifically as well. Do you want to say anything about that, Joe, about your relationship with Costanze in this play?
Well, it's one of the sins. There's a lust aspect. There is a compromising of something that's solid in Mozart's life that he wants to start chipping away at. How can he do that? Where's that inroad? He tries to measure up the man and where his weaknesses are, and this is an opportunity. Not to mention, it's one of the things that is counter his bargain that he made with God at the beginning, that he will live a life of virtue. And since God has seemingly broken his promises, he's starting to realize that promise has been broken. Well, I'm going to break my promise too. Let's see if I can't do it here and actually work to kill two birds with one stone, compromise Mozart and break my promise to God.
Yeah. Leigh, where does Costanze fit into this equation?
So, and we were actually, Matthew mentioned this last night when we were speaking. She is like Mozart's defender, almost like an attorney for Mozart, and she will go to any lengths to help him survive. She's the shield in front of Mozart. And when Matthew said that to me last night, I was like, got it. I get this now.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a really cool thing.
Well, let's hear this this play excerpt. This is a scene between Salieri, performed by Joe Capucini, and Costanze Mozart, who was the wife of Mozart, that is played by Leigh Yenrick. We'll hear an excerpt from the play Amadeus here on Live from FM 91.
Signora,
Excellency,
you have come.
I should not have done. My husband would be frantic if he knew. He's a very jealous man.
Are you a jealous woman?
Why do you ask?
It's not a passion I understand. You're looking even prettier than you were last night, if I may say so.
Oh, very much. I brought some manuscripts by Wolfgang. When you see them, you'll understand how right he is for a royal appointment. You will look at them, please, while I wait?
You mean now?
Well, yes, I have to take them back with me. He'll miss them. Otherwise, he doesn't make copies. These are all originals.
Sit down. Let me offer you something special.
What's that?
Capizzioli di Venere. Nipples of Venus. Roman chestnuts and brandied sugar.
No, thank you.
Do try. My cook made them especially for you.
Me?
Yes, they're quite rare.
Well, then I'd better, hadn't I? Just one. Not very much. Oh. Oh, they're delicious.
Aren't they? Have another.
Oh, I couldn't possibly.
I think you're the most generous girl in the world.
Generous?
It's my word for you. I thought last night that Costanze is altogether too stiff a name for that girl. I shall rechristen her Generosa, La Generosa. Then I'll write a glorious song for her under that title, and she'll sing it just for me.
I am much out of practice, sir.
La Generosa. Don't tell me it's going to prove inaccurate, my name for you.
What name do you give your wife, Excellency?
I'm not an excellency. And I call my wife Signora Salieri. If I named her anything else, it would be La Statua. She's a very upright lady.
Is she here now? I'd like to meet her.
Alas, no. At the moment, she's visiting her mother in Verona. No, Costanze, tomorrow evening I dine with the Emperor. One word from me recommending your husband as tutor to the Princess Elizabeth, and that invaluable post is his. Believe me, when I speak to His Majesty in matters musical, no one contradicts me.
I believe you.
Bene. Surely service of that sort deserves a little recompense in return?
How little?
We've heard a little scene from the play Amadeus by Peter Shaffer, the role of Antonio Salieri, played by Joe Capucini, and the role of Costanze Mozart, played by Leigh Yenrick, here on Live from FM 91. I'm your host, Brad Cresswell, and we're talking today with some of the actors and the director of Amadeus. That is happening at the Toledo Repertoire Theatre. It's April 19th through 28th. You can find more information at toledorep.org. Let me ask you guys, because you're fairly early in the rehearsal process, I mean, how do you prepare for a play like this? Do you just go by rote, and how does that work? Because I used to be an opera singer, and I'm sure there's a little difference between, performing on the opera stage and rehearsing for it, and rehearsing for a play.
So when I got the script, some of it was going through the text. This script has Italian and French and German and the multitude of... I was familiar with a lot of the musical terminology. I was a musical theater major, so at Bowling Green. So I had some of that still left up in here. But every role is different, every show is different. I'm sure it's the same in opera. You can't go into different characters with the same process. For me, this particular show is very movement heavy. I'm rolling all over the floor. I'm climbing up on tables in a corset. Which is
that Peter Shaffer's fault or
Matthew's fault?
I claim guilt for the corset.
It's the time period, so unfortunately you can't get around it, and it's actually my first show in a corset, so that's been a very interesting challenge, because it does inhibit your movement, and I can only sit with my ankles crossed and upright. Otherwise, I can't get up. You can't get up. It's it's a contraption, that is for sure. But
so
no,
we're all going to be watching to see if you can get up.
How
or
long
not.
it's going to take me to get up off the floor. Yes. But no, it's so for me. I have to come in. I have to warm up heavy, and then emotionally, the show goes the full arc.
Yeah.
To from happy and love to pain and loss of everything that you've owned, and then
in some ways you can do these extracurricular kinds of things. You can add a lot because your character isn't as prominent in the public consciousness, I think, as Salieri and Mozart are.
That's true. I get to have my own version of this person, which is in some ways freeing and in some ways daunting.
Yes, indeed. I should mention that Garrett had to actually leave during the scene that we did. He was busy doing his biomedical whatever stuff in Texas. But we do look forward to seeing him on the stage at the Toledo Rep. Joe, let me ask you. You talked about the 6 out of the 7 deadly sins. You seem to take a very structured approach to approaching a character. I wonder how this process is for you at this point, and what you're looking forward to for the rest of the rehearsal process.
This is completely different than anything I've ever done or will ever do. Where I am with this right now, it's a single-dimensional character equivalent to a stick figure on a piece of white paper. There's no dimension to him right now. The challenge for me is 2 ages, which means 2 voices, 2 bodies, because one's older than the other, and then the arc and the story and all those other things. It's every class, every workshop, every discipline that I've ever attended since I started studying theater some 35 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do have an overture by Salieri that I want to play because I want to get your reaction to it. This is the overture to an opera called The World in Reverse, or The World Upside Down, and it's by Antonio Salieri. He wrote it like the same year, I think, that Mozart passed in 1791. This particular opera has to do with gender reversal, basically. So, he kind of was experimenting with gender equality a little bit in that opera. I mean, what does that say about Antonio Salieri? As we listen to his music, we can hear that he was a great composer, and that, it may not be as melodic or tuneful as Mozart, but he was quite a wonderful musician in his own behalf, right?
Quite. He was very, very good. The thing I like about this piece that you're talking about is it does demonstrate that he isn't a rigid, single-minded type of person, that he does have that social awareness, and he is exploring different storylines, like trading genders and things like that. So he's not a stoic, tight, uptight kind of person.
Well, let's listen to some of that music because we don't play it that often. I'm sure that folks would be interested to hear this. The overture to the opera The World in Reverse by Antonio Salieri, here on Live from FM 91. That's music of Antonio Salieri from his opera The World in Reverse. We heard the overture. We're talking today with creatives from the production of Amadeus by Peter Shaffer. It's happening at Toledo Rep in April 19th through 28th. You can find more information at toledorep.org, or you can call up the box office at 419-243-9277. So we're running out of time, and I want to give you the last word, Matthew. Tell us what we need to know before we go to this play.
Daunting task. Well, it's a classic story. It deals with some incredibly moving and important themes. It's almost, or maybe even more than Shakespearean in what it tries to do in terms of presenting a tragic protagonist engaged with something far beyond himself, who ends up, as I said before, he ends up destroying himself in the process. And it's just, I can't recommend it enough. I've been in love with this play since I saw the film when I was quite young. And I've been kind of obsessed with it for most of my life. I think particularly because of the confrontation with mediocrity. There's something about that really speaks to me. I mean, we all fashion ourselves artists. We all want to do great work. But in the end, we are not Mozart.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have to confront. And I think this play does that beautifully. It brings that to the audience and sort of presents a mirror in a way. I mean, it's entirely possible that there may be a Mozart or two in the audience. But for the most part, we are Salieri's kindred. So I think that is a sobering lesson. It's not necessarily the most exciting way I could say, come see our show. But
come see our show and get depressed about your life so far.
But that to me is what's most compelling about it.
Yeah.
It really, it's like any tragedy, and I do see this as a tragedy in many ways. It has its elements of pity and fear. The Aristotelian, values of pity and fear, and those experiences are pleasurable. So I would say, come see our show. It's quite a ride.
Well, that was Matthew Gretzinger, who is director of the upcoming production of Amadeus by Peter Shaffer at Toledo Rep. I also want to thank our guests, Garrett Monasmith, who joined us earlier by phone, Leigh Yenrick, who plays the role of Costanze Mozart, and Joe Capucini, who plays the role of Antonio Salieri. Thanks for making time for us today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Live from FM 91. The production assistant for this program today was Logan Cooney. I'm your host and producer, Brad Cresswell. Thanks for joining us today here on Public Radio, FM 91.